Welcome to By Faith, a believer building podcast. My name is Konnor Arnaud LeBlanc, and today I'm joined by Paul Cox. Paul is a freelance cartoonist and the creator of Reftoons. Reftoons is a ministry that exists to preserve the legacy of the theologians of the past by producing humorous and thought-provoking comic strips and books that bring clarity to various biblical teachings through visual storytelling. Today we are discussing Paul's ministry and how engagement with culture can be approached through a biblical lens. Why is it valuable for both young and old to learn about the foundations and history of our faith? And how can a humorous packaging help these topics seem more approachable? We discuss all of that and more by faith. So, thank you so much for being here, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to have you here on the podcast today. As we were discussing before, your work has been something that's, broadly appreciated within a contingent here at Faith Community Church. And I think I had said before, I think a mutual friend of ours, Caleb Keene, is actually the person who introduced me to your work whenever he wore a Mortify Sin shirt that you had designed. Um, Funnily enough, he was wearing it as I was just starting to read uh, John Owen's work on the mortification of sin. So I think this is a great coincidence.
How providential.
It was providential, some might say. We're all about the sovereignty of God here, right?
Right.
But yeah, so, was really excited to get you on. I think there's aspects of the work that you do that open up a topic that the people of our church could really benefit from. In the avenues of using your giftings, no matter what they are, for the purpose of furthering, the work of the gospel. So I guess we can start off by just, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, how you got your start as a cartoonist, whatever you want to let us know.
Sure, yeah. I'm Paul Cox. I'm a cartoonist based in Janesville, Wisconsin. And I started, I've been drawing all my life since I was 3. And I started drawing Reftoons in 2017 when my theology started shifting to more of a reformed theology, reformed perspective on the Bible. And so I wanted an avenue to kind of share what I was learning. I didn't want to just keep it to myself. And so I thought, why not just combine my love of comics with my newfound love of theology? And so Reftoons was born in 2017, and Reftoons is a comic series based on quotes from the old dead guys, the old Reformed theologians, Reformation era theologians, and as well as some other characters from church history. So I do a lot of Puritan quotes, so like John Owen, like you were talking about, Thomas Watson, and then Reformation, John Calvin, Martin Luther, John Knox. And I'll find their quotes in some of their old works and find quotes that are helpful to the church, and I'll illustrate them in a fun, sometimes more serious way. And I share those online, and I've collected a few of them into a collection as well. So,
And those collections have actually come out into some pretty awesome and accessible books, which has been a really, really cool thing to see. Even I know for a while there, your Westminster catechism was getting passed around a few of the members of our church for a little while there, thanks to, again, Caleb Keene. But that's awesome. I listened to a bit of your interview on the Dead Men Walking podcast, and they had made a comment that you monetized your cage stage, and I thought that was really funny. But it's awesome to hear. It's awesome to hear that you felt this conviction towards the way of looking at the scriptures, and you said people need to know about this, which
Hmm.
we hope would be the motivation of anyone believer um, who comes to have strong convictions in the Lord, right?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the catechisms. Like I didn't. Um, I I guess I didn't see the resources that we wanted as a family. Me and my wife wanted as a family out there. It was just a lot of very fluffy things at the time. I started illustrating the catechisms, and I thought, well, these catechisms, they're all old historical documents in the public domain. I can use them and I can illustrate them myself and self-publish them. And so that's what I did. So I went through, the first one I did was the Baptist Catechism, and I went through and illustrated that, and um, decided just we need this stuff. There's not much in the Reformed community as far as like illustrated children's material, and so let's just put this out there. And so um, that's what we did, and glad I was able to do that.
And it's something that I think is going to be a massive benefit for generations to come. Um, so I guess going back to talking about your start, I guess in drawing and being an artist, who would you say is your biggest influence as far as your style or how you approach the art that you do?
Yeah, probably the biggest influence is Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes. I grew up reading those when they were actually printed in the newspapers, in the Sunday comics. Um, I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, so that's when we didn't have internet or all the streaming services as well. So like another inspiration was Saturday morning cartoons. I'd get up on Saturday mornings at like 7 o'clock, get a bowl of cereal, sit in front of the TV, watch all the cartoons I could, and then I would just go draw those cartoons that I loved. So just those are some of my early influences. Definitely Calvin and Hobbes for the style of artwork that I do for Reftoons, as well as Doug TeNapel, who is also a Christian illustrator, graphic novel artist. So those are my main influences.
So you've gone from Calvin to Calvin,
That's right.
the Calvin and Hobbes to the John Calvin. That's awesome. So when it came to working as a cartoonist, I guess where did you get your start there? I'm assuming Reftoons wasn't the beginning of doing it as a profession.
Correct. Um, so I went to school for art in general. I didn't really know what I wanted to do or what I could do in art as a job. And so I went to school at a small Free Methodist college in Michigan, and I got my degree, came home, well, got married, came home, and back to Wisconsin. Uh, couldn't find much work as an artist. Didn't really know what to look for. I worked as a screen printer for a couple of years, and then worked as a technical artist at a local company. And then they shut down, and I was laid off. Couldn't find any more work, and so um, I don't remember what sparked it, but I thought about looking for just freelance work. So I looked on Craigslist. That was the first place I could think of, and then I found some other avenues to get freelance work, and that was in 2009. And since then, I've been doing freelance illustration full time. So it's been about 15 years or so, um, working for various clients and realizing that, oh, people need illustrations of characters sometimes for their like company mascots and things like that. And so I got into doing cartoons for other people, And all the while, I had all these ideas up in my head of other comics that I wanted to do because I really loved making comics, and that was what I wanted to do. And so on the side of freelancing, I would create little comic strips. So I had one called Dad versus Nature. When we started having kids, it was all just kind of our experiences of parenting our children, and that one's still alive somewhere online on social media. You can find it if you search Dad versus Nature. But I haven't done anything with that since like 2014 or so. Um, but yeah, I just, as far as like creating comics, it's something I've always wanted to do, always had a passion for. When I was little, I would say I wanted to be a cartoonist when I grew up, and so I've always kind of pursued that as my goal. Um, so yeah.
What was the, I guess, the light bulb moment of like, hey, I can do this and communicate a message for my faith? Was theologians always in the back of your mind, or was there a moment prior to that where you're like, hey, I can use this for the kingdom?
No, I had no idea. Like, it wasn't until around 2016 or so that I really started to draw theologians or draw what I was learning in theology, because uh, I didn't start really going deep into theology until 2012. Um, and back then, I didn't even know what I was learning from some of these podcasts I was listening to until a few years later when someone brought up the term Calvinism, and I said, "What?
What is that?
What is that? What I'm believing?" Well, okay. So then that kind of opened the floodgate of Reformed theology and all these um, uh, teachings and works from the Puritans, how they're explaining scripture, and it was becoming so clear to me, so much more clear than what it ever was growing up. And um, that's kind of uh, the cage stage, as you mentioned before. Like, I was like, everybody has to hear about this. Why didn't I hear about this sooner? Um, and so that's when I started kind of reading about these characters like Martin Luther and his story of his conversion was so compelling to me. And that's in 2016. Before I even started Reftoons, I did a 16-page mini comic about the life of Martin Luther and leading up to his posting of the 95 Theses.
His,
And
and his life and some of the stories within Martin Luther's lifetime make for great comics. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
I think about, chucking an inkwell at the devil.
right,
Like
yeah.
it's that makes for
or
great art.
or even the way he met his wife was by smuggling her out of a convent of nuns in a bunch of barrels of pickled herring.
Man, so within these stories, right? I think oftentimes, unfortunately, a lot of factions of the modern church they shy away from the stories and the writings of theologians and church fathers. So I guess obviously you have a drive to see these stories told, and you kind of given us some insight into why. But why do you find it important for the church at large to be studied in the writings of these figures, or at least be aware of the things they've taught and how it's contributed to the church today?
Hmm, that's a big question.
That's a big question.
um, so for me personally, I feel like um, a lot of the church, the majority of kind of mainstream Christianity has gone away from the basic teachings of Scripture. And when I was growing up, there was a lot of talk of how doctrine divides, and we don't want to talk too much about doctrine. And that's if you talk about doctrine, you sometimes get labeled a legalist by people who don't necessarily understand what that term even means or implies, or even the correct way to use it. But doctrine is essential for understanding Scripture. I mean, Scripture all over talks about uh, adhering to sound teaching, which is doctrine. Doctrine is just teaching, um, and hold fast to the sound teaching of the Word. And these guys, these Puritans, let's go take the Puritans for example. John Owen, Thomas Watson. Well, even back in Reformation, you got John Calvin and his Institutes of the Christian Religion, which is just a big book of doctrine, and it's all what it is um, it's breaking down Scripture into all of the basic doctrines in a systematic way, so that you can have a full understanding of what Scripture is teaching. It's not just his own thoughts on things, it's what he's gaining as he's exegeting the text. Um, and I think that's been lost in our society today, but I think there is kind of a resurgence of that coming up with people getting tired of the smoke machines and everything of modern Christianity, and they're wanting to go back to these rich hymns that are teaching doctrine. They're through each line of the hymn is so rich in Christian theology that you could preach a sermon from a lot of these old hymns. And so people are craving that because what the modern church has given them is just basically fluff. It's been just marshmallows and ice cream and no real substance to their spiritual meal. Um, that it was fun for a time, but now there's a lot of people that I hear from who are craving something deeper, and that's what that's why I think it's important to bring these old guys back, because they were teaching something deeper. They were really digging into the depths and bringing up the gems of Scripture in a way that is when you start to read them, it's very understandable. I mean, you think of the Puritans' writings and things like that. When you first hear about them, you think, "Oh, that they're too lofty. I can't read them, or I can't understand what they're saying." But when you do start to read them, you realize, "Oh, I understand fully what they're saying, and it makes perfect sense, and it's so much more clear than anything I'm hearing today." I mean, Spurgeon, he wasn't a Puritan, but he is probably the most famous preacher ever. But he can break these truths down, and um, give them in a way that's completely understandable and um, applicable to your situation, even though he's from the 1800s.
And I think from an outsider's perspective, it seems attainability of these truths is something that you've really endeavored to highlight within the work that you do,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think people can read quotes and hear these names and kind of shrink back a bit. Um, but whenever it's put in such a way, not saying that you know cartoons being appealing is for the simplistic. However, it's not as threatening as a book of systematic theology
Mm-hmm.
at times, and people can see something communicated through your work in a cartoon and say, "Wow, like this isn't as daunting as I thought." Um, and so, I think that clamoring for something deeper is going to continue. Um, and I hope to see that happen also, through the work that you do, and I hope to see that even within the realm of the comics or the simple entertainment that people consume, um, they don't just settle for the fluff. They want to be able to uh, endeavor into something deep, even with what entertains them. Reftoons is a well known fixture now within the Reformed community, right? And I'm curious as to when did that catch steam, and did you expect Reftoons to make the splash that it has within that community?
When did it catch steam? Probably shortly. I guess shortly after it started, it kind of caught steam. It started in October of 2017. I think probably around mid 2018 is when it really started um, picking up views on social media. Um, it started out just I was just posting it on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I would just post one comic every few weeks or so, and I kind of assumed that maybe it would fill a need in the reformed niche, um, but I wasn't expecting how fast it would catch on because people were sharing memes online, and so they kind of saw these as um, as memes, but with a with a serious message. Um, so uh, the first one I did was actually not a quote from a theologian. It was just a comic strip about Martin Luther posting his 95 Theses and a bunch of kids behind him like they were trick or treating because it was October 31st. Um, but the next one I did was actually a quote from, I think it was the Charles Spurgeon pancakes quote.
Classic.
There's difficulty in everything except in eating pancakes. I did that one, and it was kind of a spoof on a men's breakfast kind of thing. And that's when I started thinking, maybe I should just illustrate these quotes. So I didn't. It wasn't always just. It wasn't from the beginning. Just I should illustrate quotes. It was I wanted to do something sharing what I was learning, kind of about the Reformation and things like that. I didn't. It kind of started developing as I started doing it. Um, and as I started posting those quotes, it was people were commenting on how it was. They were some of them were very encouraging. Like I posted one about kill sin or sin will be killing you, um, and that was encouraging for people. And I was pointing people to these resources like John Owen's Mortification of Sin, and I realized, okay, this is something that's a little more helpful, where I can still do cartoons, but make them helpful and do something that's going to be a benefit to the church. And so from then on, it was I had kind of had more of a philosophy of, well, is this truth um, that I'm putting out there necessary, or is it helpful for the church? And so that's kind of been my philosophy moving forward from there.
And I think you pinpointed that, a couple times so far in the discussion, that it filled a need that was there.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it even in a need you desired for your family,
Mm-hmm.
and other people seem to have caught that same desire. This is something that was missing within this sphere of reformed topics that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer that as Christians we should be seeking to take some ground rather than cede ground in the cultural spheres that exist. A cartoonist using his gifts to highlight the great theologians that have had massive impacts on the church, um, to me seems very much like a work in that direction. Especially when considering like the catechism books, or even the work you did with the Pilgrim's Progress,
Mm-hmm.
illustrating the Pilgrim's Progress, um, and looking at the impact culturally that that does and will continue to have on the generations to come. Is that something that you've bookmarked as a facet of your work? Like, this is gonna, continue to impact, hopefully kids in my family, because you said this was a need you wanted for your kids. I know for my family, like, this is very appealing because this is an opportunity for my kids to be transformed by the truths of Scripture and then impact the culture as they grow, become adults, and hopefully repeat the process, maybe utilizing your works. I guess to formulate that question, like, have you viewed this as something that's like potentially culture shaping as generations come and go?
Yeah, I think that's been an aspect of my thought process of doing these projects, is that they are timeless truths, uh, timeless historical documents, the catechisms, the confessions, Pilgrim's Progress, um, and to bring those to life in for a new generation was kind of was kind of always kind of part of that thought process, along with a lot of other things as well.
Awesome. um, well, awesome. I again, you know, very much so. Just want to express appreciation of the work that you've done. Looking forward to seeing how it impacts my family. Um, but I do have a question. Um, which theologian or pastor is your favorite to draw?
Charles Spurgeon is definitely my favorite to draw. Um, Not just because of his wonderful beard and but because his quotes and his theology, just the way that he presents theology, is very lends itself very well to illustration work.
Awesome. I very much so. I do enjoy the Spurgeon posts on your social media and the illustrations that you do of him. But I have to admit, I think I have a top three favorite simply based on illustration alone, but also the quote that goes with them. Um, I really like the R.C. Sproul "What's Wrong with You People" one, and "Bad Vody."
Bad vote.
Something about Vody Bakum in the form of the Hulk is just amazing. And then as a hardcore Tolkien nerd, Tolkien with Hobbit feet, Hobbit
Oh
Tolkien,
yeah.
is amazing. I love that. Um, so I guess before we go, is there anything that you have in the works coming up that you're able to speak on? Something we should be looking out for?
Yeah, actually, a few things. Well, right now, currently, uh, my other catechism, the Boys and Girls Catechism, which is a simpler catechism than the Baptist Catechism or the Westminster, is out for pre-order through Founders Ministries. You can get that along with the Baptist Catechism from Founders Ministries. Um, and I'm currently working on a graphic novel adaptation of John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion, which is set to be a 4-volume graphic novel, and I'm working on that through P&R Publishing. Um, they uh, they're working with me and an author who's adapting his institutes into a graphic novel script, and that's what I've been working on for quite some time now. And if you subscribe to Reftoons on YouTube, you can join in on some of the live drawing sessions that I do, and I'll be drawing through that graphic novel typically. And currently, actually right now, the 2025 Reftoons calendar is available at reftoons.com, and you can get that uh, in wall calendar form, or like a small desk calendar with like a wooden base. That's at reftoons.com. And yeah, you can follow Reftoons on all the social medias. If you have whatever social media you have, Reftoons is probably on it. So the big ones, Facebook, Instagram, X, and a lot of those alternative ones as well.
Awesome. And I am looking at the 2025 calendar right now, and it is exceptional. Definitely going to be throwing this up in our homeschooling space uh, for my kids to enjoy. Um, Again, Paul, thank you so much for being here today. I think this is going to be a great resource for our listeners, for the members of our church, just to see the opportunity that's had in, using your giftings for serving the Lord and communicating gospel truths. So, again, thank you for being on the By Faith podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.
By Faith is a ministry of Faith Community State Line. Thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends as we hope this connects with and encourages believers as they live their lives for Christ. Follow us on social media at By Faith Pod, and stay tuned for future episodes and shows. Again, my name is Konnor Arnaud LeBlanc, and I want to thank you for listening to By Faith.